There are so many levels of, I think, of what can be performed. And and I think when you work with images, then somehow there's always a performance inside.
Hello, I'm Stefanie Schulte Strathaus, head of the Forum Expanded section of the Berlinale, and I'm very happy to have 4 guests today. We have Jonna Kina, director of the film Afterlife, followed by Red Impasto Jar. We have Petna, Ndaliko, Katondolo, who made the film Kapita. Moritz Siebert, he made the film Zahl, Vaterschaft, Fatherland. And last but not least, Angelika, Levi, Ahorita Frames. It's so good to see all of you together, because you know that our short film programs are always, we are always trying to bring films together that we think could speak to each other in some way. And now it's not your films, but you yourself, who are here with me to talk about the films that the public is going to see in June. I would like to ask each of you to give, for the beginning, a very short, maybe not summary presentation, however you would like to call it, of your work. And then I will ask 1 or 2 questions, and then the next person. It's all in the order that we have in the program. So we start with Jonna Kina, and Afterlife, followed by Red Impasto Jar.
To put it short, the film is about Afterlife. It's a diptych film. The first part is framing the context and the natural surrounding of the archaeological site. It's a necropolis from Faliscan culture around ancient city of Narch that we see in the film. And in the second part, we see a detailed documentation of an ancient tomb object that is dating back to 6th century BC. We can presume that this object is made for the afterlife. It's coming from illegal excavations, and it has been installed for private use, probably as a decorative element. This diptych film deals with rituals of afterlife, the illegal excavations, and archaeology is physically present in the object and in the film.
I would like to continue with Kapita. Petna, you're here with your producer. Hello, welcome. And could you also tell us very briefly what your film is about?
Perhaps the best way of introducing it is to say that Kapita is the second in a triptych of films that we are working on that really grapple with the question of the relationship between indigenous memory and colonial archives, and what gets documented, what gets erased, even as it is being documented. How do we have to learn to see through the erasure, to see through what has been made invisible? We're very much in the series of films. We're very much thinking about the specific role of representation in its form that gets labeled as archive in this sort of long accumulation of Western modernity and the domination that has exerted over the rest of the world over the last many centuries. So I won't get into too much detail, but a little tiny story of how this film really got its momentum. Petna was looking at these archival images, and all of a sudden, I was off doing whatever I was doing. All of a sudden, he shouts for me to come and look. And I come running in thinking there's been an emergency, something terrible has happened. And he's got the screen up, paused, and he says, "Look, what do you see?" And it was just, flecks and textures, grainy. I had no idea. He said, "There are people in there. They literally buried us alive in these images." And he had developed a technique of I don't know the technical terms. This is where I'm gonna but he was putting different filters on the image in essence, and it enabled him to see Black bodies that were not captured in the cameras that were calibrated to white, as they were with the white balance techniques of the era and the technical capacities of those cameras. And so it became this literal project of excavating these bodies that have been captured, so to speak, in film, but still made invisible through their very capture, which is of course in dialogue in a very poignant way with the fact that so much of the film, the footage itself, was about the excavation of land and minerals and resources that were then purposed into technologies and things. So that's my best effort to say what Kapita is about.
So I have actually two questions. One is, where exactly did this archive material come from? Firstly, and secondly, what was your idea in confronting it with contemporary images and sounds, and how did you approach this?
Like where they come from, first of all, it is we got this archives from the in Belgium. It used to be known as the Berlinale Museum, and when we got this image, the idea of analyzing the image was because we were asked to give a critical feedback on this image, what they are representing today. So as we were working on them, then the project finished. I kept on watching these images because we were like, so many things were really like hidden within those images. And since I've been, now it is more than 20 years that we've been producing our own archives in Goma, this particular place in the Republic Democratic of Congo. And I always, wanted to know what was beyond the camera, why the reality was distorted all of a sudden when it comes to real images, what I was living, like, everyday life. That's in short was the I don't know if you have something to add.
Well, just that so much of the conversation as we were looking at these historical images was the stark reality that so little has changed, right? And that we can look at this as a record of the past, but if we actually look at what's going on in terms of both representation and what's made invisible, and in terms of the extraction of minerals and the extraction of life from bodies in producing, materials, the story hasn't really changed. And so it was also a question about, whether we're really willing to look at this as past, or whether it's an ongoing, continuous story that needs to be told as such.
Yeah, I think we will get back to that later when we speak about all the films, because I think this relates in some ways to every film. So I would like to continue with Moritz. Could you also give us a brief introduction?
My film is about Gerson Liebl, maybe. Gerson is a man who was born in Togo and is grandson to a German colonial doctor who worked around 100 years ago in one of the hospitals of the then, at the time, German colony, or they called it actually a protectorate. And so his grandfather, who worked in Togo, he married a local woman, and they had a baby, but just before the baby was born, which is Gerson's father, his grandfather went back to Germany, where he then married a German woman and had a family there. Gerson, more than 30 years ago, came to Germany and claimed his German citizenship. But since 30 years, he has denied that. He made a lot of court cases. He even got himself deported to Togo, had returned, and a year ago, he decided to go on hunger strike in front of the Berlin mayor, the town hall of Berlin, where he sat down in November, so in the cold month of November, and said, I'm going to stay here till I get my German passport.
Berlin, 2.5.1912. Meine Herren, das Problem der Mischehen ist ein außerordentlich schwieriges Problem und sehr schwer verständlich für diejenigen Deutschen, die in der Heimat leben und nicht jene Länder kennen, wo sich Schwarz und Weiß berührt. Ich will keine juristischen Ausführungen machen. Ich möchte nur die Tatsachen auf sie wirken lassen. Tatsachen, wie sie in anderen Staaten und Nationen festgestellt worden sind, die länger Kolonialpolitik betreiben als wir. Die üblen Folgen der Mischehen sind von allen Nationen erkannt worden, die ihr kolonisatorischer Beruf in Berührung mit farbigen Völkern niederer Kultur und minderer Zivilisation gebracht hat. Meine Herren, ich bitte Sie dringend, sich in dieser Frage von Ihren Instinkten leiten zu lassen. Ich bitte Sie dringend, keine sozialpolitischen und dogmatischen Momente in das Problem der Mischehen hineinzutragen. Ich bitte Sie einfach, die nackten Tatsachen auf sich wirken zu lassen.
On the image level, I film Gerson in his act of resistance of an injustice which happened 100 years or started more than 100 years ago and is still going on till today. And on the sound level, I try to make visible or audible the research I did into the project, where a lot of different documents are read, which can be from documents from the time where his father went to a colonial office in Togo, stating that he is married to a wife, a local wife, and who is expecting a child, as well as explanations from German parliaments who had to deal with Gerson's request for a German passport, who refused it. And so to show a certain continuity which reaches over 150 years in German politics, where we hide against laws that were created 100 years ago with a very racist content, and still use them today to say, sorry, we cannot give you nationality.
Yeah. Why did you decide to do it in black and white? What does that tell us about the relation between history and the present? And secondly, how did you first meet him and then work with him on the film?
So I didn't have a lot of time to think really of a concept, but one thing I thought about, which was the black and white image, and I somehow had the impression my film, I knew it will span over, have two time layers. One is 100 and 110 years ago, and one is today. And so I somehow wanted to reflect that in the imagery. And so one idea was that the imagery of the time was black and white, but I'm using a modern video camera, so it has this kind of very clear image, which is not at all a filmic image. So somehow this image, for me, combined the two time layers. And I wanted to reduce information from the image by turning away the color to give space for the layer on the audio.
Thank you. Angelika, you're next. Ahorita Frames. Please also give us a little introduction.
Yeah, okay. Well, Ahorita Frames tells the story of Nan and Nancy, who two of the undocumented cleaning workers, Latin Americans, who cleaned the toxins of the buildings of the Ground Zero after 9/11 in Manhattan.
Y bueno, cuando llegamos entramos a un edificio impresionante, típico de Manhattan, en la calle Greenwich. Y ahí veías los fierros esos que quedaron. Cuando tocaban una trompeta que hacían el duelo porque sacaban un muerto, escuchábamos nosotros. Y nos dieron unos suits, unos trajes, esos trajes blancos que se ponen, máscaras, guantes, y nos dijeron con
cinta
esto,
americana.
Cinta americana en la mano, $12 la hora, y básicamente es limpiar. Eran aspiradoras, vacuums,
Para eso.
Y eso era nuestro trabajo, ¿no? Aspirar todo.
The film moves from New York to the PedWest border, crossing of Tijuana, Mexico. So I think I choose this also because the women experiences are not told. I mean, they are untold until today, and there is such a big narrative, an official narrative of the heroes of the 9/11, but they are never named or appeared, even not in the 9/11 memorial.
The performances that we see in the film, how did they happen? Were they made for the film, or was that another project? Could you explain that a little bit better, how that came into?
So we are writing on a script for a longer film. So that's and when I was in Tijuana, and I went to the Border Crisis Center and also to other self-organized groups there on the border, and it was in 2019. So I proposed a workshop, and we made it directly in the center. So you see, you don't see a dust, or you don't see the real situation of what the women are telling about. You see the migrants who are stuck at the border, and so it was really surprisingly for me also that. So also in the performance outside, they were participating 3 of the Mexicans who were deported from the US. So they played the soldiers and the fire workers, and that's in a way I shifted the whole story to the border, and they are all not actors. Yeah, so in a way we made it in 3 days or so. We worked first. We met a lot sometimes, and I also made interviews. Or we spoke a lot about the situation, but then I decided it's not possible to put it in. I mean, it's not too hard. Yeah. The situation at the border was too violent. Yeah.
I would like to thank you all very much for your films, for being here. And once again, hope to see you all very, very soon. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.